Good evening, and welcome to the Council Advisory Committee CAC meeting of the 9th of January 2023. This meeting is being held in chambers, and the meeting is being live streamed on Facebook Live. On behalf of staff and council, I wish to extend a Happy New Year to our citizens. The most up-to-date meeting package is on Town of Kentville website. This meeting is called to order. Have all of the councillors received and reviewed their meeting package? Does any member of council have information pertaining to a matter before this council which has not been publicly circulated? As the Council Advisory Committee, we will vote as a committee to either send business forward to the council meeting for ratification, return to staff for further information or review, or defeat the recommendation. I will remind members of council that we should continue to be mindful of our decision-making wheel to make balanced and respectful decisions while adhering to our code of conduct. This council, through policy and by motion, has adopted Robert's Rules as our rules of order, our parliamentary procedure, and as the chair of the meeting, it is the chair's responsibility to use those orders to ensure the business of the town is conducted. The council will be voting electronically on all motions except administrative, which will be by show of hands. Are there any conflict of interest issues that council should be aware of before the meeting commences? The chair notes that we have quorum. We have been provided with a proposed agenda. Are there any further additions to the agenda, CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So I would like to add just under in camera, if council would consider a contractual item. So I would recommend that 10A be contractual, and at which point 10B would be the personnel matter.
Excellent, thank you. So for the record, for in camera, 10A will be legal contract and 10B will be personnel. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I would just like to add to the in-camera discussion on the finance director advertisement that's recently in the paper.
Thank you. If it is the will of council by consensus, is there any issue with adding that? By consensus, everyone approves. Thank you. So that's in camera, and that will be job posting, so it would be legal, or no, personnel, sorry, personnel, job posting, and that would be item 10B, again shifting personnel to 10C. If I could have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Councillor Zabian, thank you. Councillor Huntley for the second, thank you. All those in favor? Deputy Mayor, are you? Oh, thank yes. You. Okay. All those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. Council Advisory Committee meetings of December 12th, 2022 were circulated for approval. We have one change to the information that was provided, and that was at item 8A. In the first sentence, that there was expressed concerns about Councillor Huntley joining the Federation. And we also need a spell check on Ms. Holliman's, Jennifer Holliman's name. I'm not sure that we've got the correct spelling, but that's for our recording secretary to have a look at. So there are changes to those minutes. Are there any further changes? None? All right, we'll move on. We have no presentations this evening, so we will move on to our department reports and recommendations, and the directors have provided their reports for council review and will provide an update and receive questions from council. The reports will be presented and are part of the record this evening. Only items of new business arising from the reports will be taken for motion. CAO Troke, if you could start by introducing our department reports.
Sure. Well, thank you. So, Mayor Snow, tonight I'll be doing my best fill in on the finance report. Before I do start tonight, I also want to thank Jason for pinch hitting us the last minute. Our deputy clerk is out tonight, and so Jason has valiantly stepped in to do his best impersonation. So thank you. Appreciate it. So finance report, so council should have in their package, basically the staff report as well as the projection report. Revenues are at 90.5%. One of the questions that had come up, I believe, in our last session was around, are there any other provincial sources that are outstanding? And I do not believe there are any. So we are at a point where a few items were written off, I believe, in the last session. And so at this point, there's not appear to be anything outside of those items that were written off. Expenditures are at 78.6%. And when you look at our projection report, there is a surplus of 28,700 up from our last report. Of course, one of the biggest things that could have impacts on this number, the longer the snow holds off, right, Director Bell, the better. So we are in a situation where this number could, as long as the weather is working in our favor, that number obviously could grow. I would also like to add to my report, and this was a request that had been made through a number of councilors with regards to legal expenses, so I did want to make sure that this made it into the meeting tonight. This was circulated for council through email earlier today, but with regards to a number of legal expenses, the update that was requested, the action with regards to the Main Street property for 22-23 was legal expenses of $34,664. The action of Zabian versus Gerard, the 22-23 number is $11,067. And the legal defense with regards to an insurance claim, that item actually went through our insurer and of course capped out at $25,000 in 21-22. So there is no other expenses that would go towards the town, where the maximum deductible for the town on that would have been $25,000. So those were the update on those items as per the request that was made.
Excellent. Thank you very much, CAO. Are there any questions with regards to the finance report or the projection report? Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. CAO, thank you for providing that. So the first two items, the action of the Robinson property and Zabian versus Gerard, both of those, insurance didn't obviously play a part in either of those.
So Councillor, I'm sorry, my apologies.
Go ahead,
Through the
CAO,
chair.
please.
Thank you. So with regards to the matter of Zabian versus Gerard, insurance would be tracking any claims against that up to a maximum of $25,000.
Right, so where it's at 11 now, we paid the 11.
Correct.
The town has. And the Robinson obviously is fully town paid taxpayer dollar. Thank you.
The Robinson property at this point is correct.
Right, yeah, thank you.
All right, and you have one more report, a withdrawal from capital reserves for us.
Thank you, thank you. So as we would normally do in this case here, we have draw number 2 with regards to the town capital reserve in the council's package. You will see on page 3 a list of items, particularly involving the purchase of a truck and some work with regards to the VIC and 66 Station Lane. So the total is $118,793.49. So the recommendation, I recommend to Council Advisory Committee that the attached resolution be approved for a withdrawal of $118,793.49 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation. The transfer will partially fund several acquisitions acquired to date during the year of 22-23. After this approval, I recommend that this resolution be forwarded to the next meeting of Town Council for ratification.
Thank you very much, CAO. And the motion would be that CAC recommend to the January 30th, 2023 council meeting approval of a withdrawal of $118,793.49 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation. If someone could move that, please. Councillor Huntley, thank you. And for the second, Deputy Mayor, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to the January 30th, 2023 council meeting approval of a withdrawal of $118,793.49 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend to the January 30th, 2023 council meeting approval of a withdrawal of $118,793.49 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. Okay. Okay, no problem. I understand.
She did tell me how to do it.
I think if you stand on one foot and put your right hand in the air, it works.
I think she sabotaged it before she came.
She's sitting at home watching on her sick bed.
There, see, I minimized it.
Yay!
Just reminded me.
Voting is closed. Woo-hoo! And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, CAO, we'll move on to our Planning and Development Committee report, or not committee, Director, Acting Director report, please.
Thank you. Council has a report in front of them from our acting development officer. Development permits, we had 5 permits that were issued in the month of December with a total valuation of $206,000. This brings year to date of 135 permits and building valuation of $20,999,000. With regards to some projects, we have site plan approval for Vida Living, the proposed development on Heartland Court, which is now closed. McDougall Heights rezoning, there was a meeting with the applicant just prior to Christmas, and there was some questions back and forth that are being worked through. And then staff are still working with Encore, who are looking at making some revisions to their site plan approval. And there's lots of correspondence, lots of folks are, particularly folks who have single lots or an empty lot, have been making inquiries with regards to opportunities to either develop or divide and sell. So there's lots of activity still going on in that area. So that would be the staff report on development, planning and development.
Excellent, thank you, CAO. And there's a question, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I direct it directly
Please.
to the CAO? CAO, with respect to McDougall Heights rezoning, so the way that I read that, that staff are waiting for information before proceeding to first reading. So is it should it be council's expectation that the next step on this is it goes directly to first reading? And I'll just continue. Because my, I don't want to say concern, but my trepidation with that is that based on a number of letters that have come in from the public that primarily reside in that area, there's been various pieces to their letters that address other things within that neighborhood that may directly relate to public works and other associated fields. So I know that there's going to be a lot of information that comes down the pipe for sure, and I just wasn't sure if our expectation is it's first reading. And yeah, thank you.
CAO, please.
Thank you. So thank you for that question. So there's kind of 2 pieces here. First of all, the back and forth that you see with regards to the proposal is really trying to get crunchy around those pieces that we can absolutely have the best snapshot of what the developer is proposing, what it would look like. And then second to that is the staff report, trying to make sure that we have all of the areas covered that would speak to each one of those pieces. So from a process perspective, it's kind of like creating a book with a bunch of chapters and making sure that the picture that's coming forward is accurately representing the conversation that's been back and forth. So it's been very good with regards to, we have questions and getting responses, but also making sure that whatever comes forward is giving the information to those folks who want to be able to say, what does this look like, or what am I going to see, so that it's the best representation that we can have. So all the parties on this are passing information back and forth to make sure that we have as good of a snapshot and as good of a storybook that goes with it,
Okay.
so then council can have a full conversation about it.
Okay, great, thank you.
CAO, further to that, part of the MGA, particularly with rezoning and this type of development, is there not a schedule for a public participation meeting? And will that occur after first reading?
Yes, Mayor, so that's exactly how that would play out. So the first reading is the opportunity for council to collect the information, poke prod, ask whatever questions they might have. And then, of course, there's an opportunity for that session, which would give feedback from the public, and then you would then move to your next reading of that rezoning application.
Right, and that would be its own meeting, and the public would have the opportunity to come into council and express their views, and as well, all of the information that we've received to date would become part of that package, and so for our consideration of second reading, but none of that is triggered until we do first reading, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. So anyone who's already sent us letters, your letters are on file. You do not have to resend your letter. Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question, excuse me. When the time comes for the public to be able to attend that meeting, I know it had been mentioned to meet here, but the last time we had the meeting, it was very crowded, and I don't feel they had enough room. So I'm wondering, does it make sense to have it here, or do we have it somewhere else? Thank you.
CEO.
Yes, so and that conversation's been happening with our communication folks, so the storm team looking at from a planning perspective. And so as we move along, they're certainly going to look at what those options are to make sure that it gives a comprehensive opportunity.
And I assume there will be consideration for online participation through Zoom, much like we did with other things, other planning items that we did during the height of COVID.
Correct, and the gentleman to your right will be the one who will help make sure that whatever we pick, if it's the right venue, to be able to allow for that as well.
Okay, perfect. All right, if there's no further questions on the acting director's report, we'll move to the cash in lieu for parking report.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So this is an item that you see there's a briefing note which was supplied by our planning and development folks. In 2019, the land use bylaw had made some changes which allowed the development officer to accept cash in lieu. Now, in June of 2017, council approved the structural cost. So this is one element in the calculation when determining cash in lieu. And so at that time in 2017, the structural cost of a parking space was deemed to be $1,650. Now, that is an element that then you take into consideration that each parking spot requires 280 square feet, and that there is a land valuation. So in this case, property valuation would say a land valuation is X, and you multiply that by 280 plus whatever the structural cost is to give you the cash in lieu calculation. And that would be for each and every spot. So if there was one spot, it would be times one. If it was two spots, it'd be times two. So it's one of those pieces that we wanted to make sure that council was familiar with how this works, but two, this has not been updated since 2017, and we saw it as an opportunity to bring this before council. And the component in this that council approves is that structural cost. So Director Bell, working with Kirsten Duncan, we're looking at this, and we approached property valuation, and basically a structural cost that is being proposed, it would be moving the structural cost of the parking space from $1,650 to $2,500. So the land value you would see, which is a separate item, property valuation gave us a land value in Kentville of $9 a square foot. So if you ran that as a calculation, each parking spot that would be cash in lieu would then have a value of $5,020. So the piece here tonight would be looking for council to approve the structural cost, which we would be taking from $1,650 to $2,500.
Thank you very much, CAO. And to turn that into a motion is that CAC recommend to the January 30th, 2023 council meeting approval of an annual structural cost increase to the parking space calculation to be changed from $1,650 to $2,500. If someone could move that, please. Councillor Zabian, thank you. And for the second, Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to the January 30th, 2023 council meeting approval of an annual structural cost increase to the parking space calculation to be changed from $1,650 to $2,500. Discussion on this matter. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. If I could direct to the CAO.
Please.
How many spaces does the town currently have leased out?
I don't actually know the number leased out, but I certainly be happy to get that and bring it back to you.
If you could, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian asked one of my questions, so I'll ask the other one if I could to the CAO.
Certainly.
So are we talking about the downtown core?
CAO, please.
That's correct.
Okay, so does this mean, and I'm sorry, I don't know this, but does this mean that the people who are living in apartments down in the downtown core would not have any parking available to them?
No, so typically what it would mean is that if you were doing any kind of a development or a redevelopment and you did not have the number of spaces that would be required, then as opposed to stopping the development because you don't have a space, you could do cash in lieu. And essentially what happens is that cash then goes towards the maintenance of essentially the other existing parking spaces that the town owns in the downtown core.
Okay, so somebody could, a developer could have have apartments with no parking space. They just have to pay to the town, and so those people that would rent from them wouldn't have a parking space if they decide to do it that way?
Typically, it would be not that you would not have any. Typically, it would be because of the space that be available, it may be reduced.
Okay, so there could be somebody left out short. Like if there was 2 spots and you had 4 tenants, there would only be 2 spots. That would be 2 people don't have a spot. Is that right?
So it is basically as Councilor, in this case here, what would happen would be if someone came forward and they were required to say have 4 parking spots and they could only make 3 work.
Yeah.
Well, then essentially those 3 are then allocated to however many units are there, or the commercial space would need a certain amount of parking spots in order to operate a commercial space. So again, it could be a reduced number for that commercial space. So it just all depends on what the proposal is. It just at least gives an option in situations where a development could be considered to move ahead even if it didn't have the sufficient space needed to meet all of the requirements.
Okay. So is this a good idea? I mean, to me, I don't know if it sounds like a good idea or not a good idea. So I'm just wondering what the benefits are of this, you know.
So it's on our books. We've had the ability to do it. The change really was in 2019 was where, and as opposed to this coming to council, it gave the development officer the opportunity to accept it. And really tonight is about putting a value on it. But if that were an item that council wanted to relook at, we certainly could bring that back as a separate conversation. Tonight's just the valuation component, but certainly council are happy to kind of put that into a larger document for consideration if that's something that would like brought back to council.
Yeah, I'm just not sure about it. That's all. That's why I'm asking the question, so, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to the CEO. So Councillor Zabian did ask my question about how many, because it is reoccurring revenue every year, right?
No, so
It's
cash
one
in lieu is
time
one
only,
time.
cash in one time, okay, sorry, I should have known that. So if the actual cost, like if we're looking at the parking space in 2017, was $3,050, but we were only charging, 1650, and then it's proposed to be 5,020 for 2023. Why wouldn't, due to the structural cost, why are we only going up to 2,500 and not 5,020?
Well, I think on this one, and mainly because the structural cost calculation is from the Director of Public Works, I think ask Dave to come up and just have a conversation.
I
with him.
think you're mixing two things. So, right now, that using the calculation, that line is an example of what a parking spot would cost. And the recommendation is the single number, the structural cost, so the S in the formula is.
I'm sorry.
Is 1,600, and
Sorry.
we're putting it up to 2,500.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, so the 3,050 and the 5,020 those are representative numbers of the S. The S.
No, that's the full cost. So it would cost a developer, in 2017, right up to today, they would have to pay $3,050 to not have a parking spot.
Right.
Tomorrow, they'll have to pay $5,020 to not have a parking spot.
Yes. Yeah, I understand.
Okay, yeah, but it's not just the S, that's the whole cost. The S is the 1,650 to 2,500.
That goes excluding land.
Excluding the land.
Land is on top, but that's the.
Okay.
part of the structure, it's just
Right.
pave it,
Okay.
but,
Yes, so those numbers are not the total number. It's just germane to a portion of it, and then you have to, those numbers include the land portion as well. So they're inflated.
it's the formula, sorry, through the chair, if you want to.
Certainly, please. Oh, let me put your mic on here. Sorry, Director.
Yeah, I don't even have the formula, I guess, in front of me, but what I recall, the portion that Kirsten asked me to calculate was what it would cost to build them excluding land. So that's asphalt and gravel and labor to structurally build a parking stall, whether usually you would do that in a complete parking lot where you're doing 20 lots or 20 spaces. That's what it costs per space. And then she gets a price per square foot from PVSC.
Yeah, $9.
$9 a square
Yeah.
foot. So the sum of those two, with 2,500 and then the other 26 or 700, is that what it is?
Yep.
Make the 55,000 and change for one space.
Okay. That's,
That's clear.
it's clearer now, yes.
And for the information of council, we do have leased spaces downtown, but they aren't part of this calculation. This calculation is so that a developer can continue to make their development with inadequate amount of parking spots that are deemed necessary by our land use bylaw. And if you think about town hall parking and how many cars are sitting there overnight, those are probably people who live in the downtown whose building owner probably doesn't have a parking spot for them, so they use these spots. And the town of Kentville does have, well, we had 602 and we took 14 out of Center Square over the summer.
Something like that, I believe, yeah.
So my mental math
Yep.
isn't that, but we have over 500 parking spots and many that can be used on an overnight basis, including back here in Town Hall. So there is parking available.
Over off of Station Lane, and, yeah, for sure.
So are there any further questions on this matter? Councillor Maxwell.
Okay, so two things. Deputy Mayor asked a question that I was curious about because, we're asking for 2,500 and we're looking at 5,020 as for 2023, and why we're only asking for 2,500. And when I was reading through it, I thought it must be a typo because I couldn't make sense of it. And after discussion, I still can't make sense of that. So I don't know if Deputy Mayor can make sense of it, but I can't make sense of it, other than the fact that, are we not, counting the land where it's already going to be, or, why is it 2,500 when the cost is right now 3,050, and this year it'll be 5,020? I can't make sense of that. So it still not makes sense to me. And then my other question is, So people who live in the downtown core don't have a parking space, are in our back parking lot leased. So we're charging them to put their
No.
car back there?
No.
Okay,
No,
good.
that's free parking in our parking spot.
Yeah.
There are leased spots. So for example, on Justice Way,
Yeah,
those are leased spots, and they're leased by the companies
That own.
that have their buildings there.
right.
But, and they pay the town of Kentville on, I think, a monthly basis.
Yep.
Okay.
For those parking spots, yes.
Okay, so, you know, the other day, Dave, I'm sorry, but I'm just not getting it, but,
It's math.
So if
It's
I
math.
could, and it just, essentially, back in 2017, what it cost to basically compact and pave one parking spot was $1,650. And today, that's $2,500. So we want to make that change in the formula. The other piece, which is how much is each square foot worth, and so property valuation tells us each square foot is worth $9. So you take that and multiply that by the 280. So those two numbers together, so 2,500 plus 2,520. When you add those two together, you come up with what the total value would be. So the comparable numbers would be 3,050 versus 5,020. So there's an increase here that is both because of the cost that it would be to pave a parking spot, but also the value of the land has gone up since that time.
okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this matter? Councillor Zabian?
Thank you. Just for a little bit of clarity, with our bylaws, if you were gonna build an apartment building and you had 10 apartments, you have to have one spot for every 2 apartments. That's what our bylaw is. So everybody has a car now, so you may think, well, I need 10, but my land isn't gonna afford, you know, I'm gonna have a smaller building or bigger, so that's where this kind of would play in. You'd be giving the town a little money to be able to accommodate. Thank you.
All right, so we have a question. The question is that CAC recommend to the January 30th, 2023 council meeting approval of an annual structural cost increase to the parking space calculation to be changed from $1,650 to $2,500. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right, CAO, Community Economic Coordinators Report?
I do not have any update on that, where
Okay.
we had a short period over Christmas, but we'll be back next month with an update there.
Excellent, thank you. Parks and Recreation, Director Bedingfield. The podium is yours.
Good evening and Happy New Year, everyone. Just a really short update tonight. Probably the biggest one in our parks is that the 2 bridges were replaced on the Harvest Moon Trail behind the curling club. That's really exciting. We're considering that phase 1. Phase 2 is when the snow melts. The on points to both of those ramps will be cemented in. So that'll be exciting and add a little bit more accessibility. Under council-related stuff, I really wanted to report on our conversation at the last accessibility meeting. It was quite a meaty one, and we're pretty proud of that. So what the committee has decided moving forward is that for each meeting, we're going to kind of take a theme, certainly in the foreseeable future, as it relates to priorities within our action plan. So this past meeting, which happened last Friday, so it was after this report was submitted, I apologize, was to focus on transportation. So within transportation, parking is part of that. So to go alongside with the conversation that you just had, there's a few steps that staff brought back to the committee to say this is what we need and the direction we want to take in order to move forward and fulfill this requirement. So the first one being that we don't actually have the data, up-to-date data. I think the last study that was done was in 2014. We don't have the up-to-date data to see who's actually using our parking, what are the demographics, who's not using our parking, where are the gaps. So step 1 is to do that piece. There is talk about updating the land use bylaw that you folks were just discussing. Right now, we don't have a lot of teeth in that around accessible parking and what we require of developers in order to create accessible parking. So taking a look at that. And then seeing where we are from there and having an overall parking plan. Another priority that we talked about was public transportation. That is a big piece when it comes to accessibility in the town. Certainly King's Transit is part of that, as is King's Point to Point, but the committee really wanted to look a little bit further. So what can the town actually do to create accessible transportation? So they passed a motion to start a task team that would answer the question, what does accessible transportation look like in Kentville? So you'll be hearing more about that in the future. We had an update on the active transportation plan. So Becca Craig, who's our active living community coordinator, has taken the lead on this position as kind of the one to make sure that all the pieces fit together. So she presented on her process and how what it's going to look like over the next couple of years to roll that out, and probably most importantly, where the engagement will fall within that, and continue to bring updates back to the committee. We also talked about sidewalks, so that was a big one underneath that. Director Bell had come in a meeting prior to that, or a few meetings prior to that, yeah, that's right, to talk about how decisions are made, or what the schedule is and what that looks like. Of course, we know that over the next 2 years, because of the funding that we received and the schedule that we're on with our active transportation plan, the downtown sidewalks will be redone, but there's still no definite, this is an assessment tool that we use for sidewalks in our town. So that's on the docket for staff to take a look at best practices kind of across the country around sidewalk assessment, and then bring that back to the committee to make sure that lens of accessibility is put on that as well. And then the last thing we talked about was around circulation. So when we talk about circulation with regards to transportation, part of that is wayfinding. So those are like the blue signs that you see around town, guiding people to different opportunities in town. But that's just one piece of it. It's also, if you're someone who's using a mobility device, how many benches are around town? If you're someone who has sighting issues, where the opportunity either to read Braille or to have audio cues that's telling you what stores are available, all of these different things. So we're pulling together a bit of a plan on what an actual circulation plan would look like to navigate through Kentville, not just the downtown, the whole area. So a few key pieces that came up. One was when we're talking about this accessibility lens, what do we even mean? So there was some really good conversation around that. And essentially, the whole purpose of that conversation was to make sure that when I say that word and you say that word, we're talking about the same thing. So there was some really good discussion. One of the points that came out, and I do want to credit this to one of our committee members, was that accessibility needs to mean more than just a need. We often talk about how do we get people into a place, what does this building need in order to be accessible, or this program? But it was brought to the attention that we also need to be talking about wants, and that people with various degrees of mobility issues or mental health struggles also get to participate in things that they want to do. It's not just, awesome, I can go into town hall and pay taxes. It's a really good day. Maybe we could do something else for that. So that was a big part of it as well. There was an update on the anti-racism plan, and more will be brought forward to the committee and this council at that piece. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was that within that committee, we talked obviously about the street naming policy that you folks passed, and we've had 6 applications as it relates to Cornwallis Street, and so we will be moving through that process. And that's my report.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions for the director? No questions?
Great.
Good report. Are we doing a police chief?
If I could just say a couple words.
Okay, Chief, CAO, please go ahead with the police report.
Thank you. So the chief is away, and but I did want to mention to council that the Department of Justice did offer training for our new board members. We had an opportunity to do it online in connection with Annapolis, and it was an opportunity for a lot of folks to get kind of the lay of the land on this and ask a lot of questions. So I just wanted to let folks know that things are moving on that front, with anticipation of the upcoming first meeting will then allow the board to select its chair and so on. But we did start on the training part of this, so I didn't want to let council know.
Thank you, CAO. If there's any questions with regards to that training for the CAO? All right, moving right along, Director Bell, your report, please.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. My report is quite brief this month, as it was a short month. I'll start with Water Commission, as I often do. So in December, we had a motor fail once again at one of our well pumps, and we had the pump pulled over Boxing Week to replace that motor. We decided while we had that out of the well to lower that pump an extra 20 feet. To provide more water over the pump. It had been replaced several years ago, and for some reason, we're unsure why, 10 years ago, it was raised from its previous depth set of about 100 feet to 80, so we put it back down where we all thought it originally was some 20 years ago when that well was first drilled. So the final electrical connections were completed this past weekend, enabling this well to be put back into service. But otherwise, the month of December was operationally uneventful for the Water Commission, with a few new residential and commercial connections. Under sanitary sewer area service, likewise, operationally, there were no issues with the Kentville sanitary sewer service. Under Public Works, we are now in winter operations mode, although so far pretty open winter. But I'm sure it's going to come eventually. But the boys are busy keeping their equipment ready for snow and ice control and our streets and sidewalks clear. Under Traffic Authority, I do have a bit of an update on the lighting for the new bridge. We still call it the new bridge. I spoke with our Nova Scotia Power representative earlier today, and they expect to install lighting within the next week on both ends of the bridge, both of the approaches, to help illuminate those. But as I mentioned before, this is sort of a phase one that we can control, and the province, through their Nova Scotia Public Works department, is working on a design for the second phase to help light the bridge itself. So we not sure what that's going to involve, but they say they're going to consult with us to help make it fit our brand sort of thing and the type of lights that we typically use in the downtown. So interested to see what that brings, but at the short term, we should see within the week or so at least the approaches lit up better. So that'll help with both pedestrian and vehicle crossings getting onto and off of the bridge. What else? Under projects, most certainly by now, most of our capital projects are wrapped up, at least construction-wise, for the season. The first phase of McDonald in Henry subdivision is complete for the year. Turned out, I think, really great. Albeit, they had a late start. They were lucky with the weather and got things all tidied up just sort of at the middle of December while the asphalt plants were still open. So if you haven't had a chance to go up yet, take a look at McDonald and Henry, the bottom part of Henry Street. Turned out great. Phase two will as it's already been sort of pre-approved for the contractor to roll right into phase two for early in the construction season this coming late spring. And other than that, we're working on the 5-year capital plan now. We're prioritizing projects for this upcoming fiscal year, and to add things to our capital budget for approval in the next month or so when we meet to discuss budgets. So we're working on some of that to sort of collect the field work and prioritize those projects. So I guess other than that, that is my brief report for December.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Director. Are there any questions for the Director? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I have a few. The first one is I had a few residents approach me asking me about installation of sidewalks and what that looks like and how that works and how the funding piece of it works. if it all lies with the resident, or if it's partially funded by us and partially funded by them. So that's just sort of a blanket question.
It depends if that's an existing subdivision. I mean, most subdivisions,
It is, sorry.
yeah, we don't require require sidewalks in subdivisions. And I
Yes.
did have a conversation with one resident, that may be who was reaching out to you. To my knowledge, there's no real mechanism to sort of start a petition, if you will, or something to get community support to co-fund a sidewalk on existing street. Our bylaws now say they only need to be on arterial roads, which, really, even the downtown streets are not that. They are collector roads or minor collectors. We're all, of course, aware of the rezoning application that's in, and that street, certainly is one that we've looked at in the past and actually made changes to our bylaw, because originally, I think a street of that classification, a minor collector like Acadia, would have required sidewalks in the past. That got changed by a previous council, and then they were never required. Higher volume roads, I'm certainly in favor of them. Local subdivision streets, we haven't done them in the past, and right now there's certainly no mechanism to have them installed. And maybe the CAO can add to that, but don't have much else. I don't think I can add, Deputy Mayor, to that right now.
Okay. Yeah, based.
Funding wise, certainly, yeah, I don't think we put any new sidewalks that I can recall. We're into replacement, in places where they exist. But as a new subdivision is developed, they aren't part of the subdivision bylaw requirements.
Okay. Yeah, so the sidewalk there in front of Main Street Station
Oh, yes.
would be directly across from where it used to be Together, I think it was called, but now it's called something, Gerber Developments or
Right
something.
here, yes.
Yes, yep. I'm just wondering if that is something that is on the radar for the upcoming capital budget.
The upgrades and replacement of?
Yes.
Because of the condition?
Yes.
As Director Bedingfield mentioned, this year's funded through the Green Infrastructure Program this year is the downtown, 2 phases. This upcoming fiscal year and the following, or the 2 years, we're going to work on the downtown ones. That's somewhat outside of the downtown
It is.
area, but I know the section you're talking about, it is in poor condition, and we've tried different things as, patches on them, asphalt and things, but I would like to see more replacements done, and that is certainly a good one to to recommend
Okay.
during our budget discussions, as
Okay.
we do have beyond the large grant, there's of course always gas tax money that could be allocated for that. So that's a good one to
Okay.
put on the high priority list for sure.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Yep, that's all I have. That's it.
Director Bell, you mentioned that we're now going into winter operation modes, but our weather's been so good, I notice folks are still parking on the street. So are we sending out, our usual, hey, it's winter, take your car off the street signs?
Pretty
or
sure that's,
anything?
yeah, sorry. Pretty sure it's on our, the storm team has put that online, and we did have a bit of a nice event, I think last Thursday evening, where the guys were out from probably 8 until about 2, and then back in 5 in the morning, doing streets and sidewalks. And there were certainly several side streets where we had cars on the road where we just couldn't get around them. So I had a conversation with KPS, and they're going to certainly watch those a little closer during our events like that. But yeah, it's a problem. We can't go through them, and don't want to damage them. So
Right.
in times we have to just either back out of that little dead-end street that has cars on it. There's a few, as you are aware, along Park Street there across from Memorial Park that are certainly hard to plow at the best of times, but when there's cars on them, it's extremely difficult. But yeah, thank you
All
for
right.
that reminder.
Okay, thank you. And there's no further questions.
Thank you.
All right, CAO, looks like you get to do your report now.
Okay, well, I'll start off by saying, obviously, we've already touched on the budget is in a surplus situation. On the human resource side, the director of finance position is posted, and we had Manulife had come in before Christmas, where there was discussions where staff could have an opportunity to meet, review benefits, look at pension plans. Council information, the request with regards to KBC is in the package. We'll touch on that in a moment. And boundary review, so the Utility Review Board has approved the Town of Kentville submission with regards to the review that was done. So no changes was accepted by the Utility Review Board. And a few meetings took place just before Christmas. One of the things, KPMG was doing some work with regards to Kings County and the permitting and inspection review. So myself and the acting development officer had an opportunity to participate in that. And I really believe it's not just looking at their process, but, continuing to look at customer service and making sure that as the development happens throughout the entire county, that we have all the right pieces in place. So it was a good session, and attached, I believe in the package is I believe there is correspondence in the package with regards to the report from the Utility Review Board.
All right, thank you, CAO. And questions to the CAO on this report? Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. If I may direct to the CAO.
Certainly.
CAO, just wondering if there's any plans or if there is a hiring committee in place for Director of Finance.
So the Director of Finance, typically what you would do for a position of that, you would have the CAO and typically other directors on the hiring committee.
Okay. I know in the past, I think some councillors had been on hiring committees with other directors. Just wondering if that's something that maybe, I guess council, if they thought that'd be something they could look at. And my other question is, I know some time ago, and I don't know if it was a year and a half ago, there'd been mention that the human resource manual or policy was gonna come back to council for review. Just wondering if that's on the way back or where that stands now.
So it's been through staff. There was some work with legal. Basically, the majority of the items in that are part of our working procedure, but happy to come back and have a conversation with council on that at any point in time.
Okay. But that will come, we have to vote on that, right? Or rescind the old one? Is that?
There is components of that might be a consideration with regards to budget. But outside of that, most of these are operational pieces that, actually even just the item you touched on
Right.
about fair hiring practices and so on
Yeah.
like that. But happy to come back and do an update with that and have a discussion with council.
Okay. So it hasn't been, it has been passed? That's what I'm confused about.
It is operationally in place.
Okay. So what happened, just I guess for clarity, what happens to the old one though? If there's an old one in place that council had approved, I don't know how many years ago, wouldn't that one still be? How can a new one go, if the old one hasn't been rescinded, how can a new one come along?
With regards to this particular policy, the old policy was from 1970 something.
Right.
So the majority of that policy wasn't operational anymore anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the policy, which staff was actively involved in and rewriting, much of the policy came into effect immediately after those changes because what was there just wasn't operational.
Right.
And as I said, there's a few components in it that might have some budget considerations that those elements would come back for a discussion with council. But the day-to-day operational stuff, that's all operationally in place.
Okay. I guess I would just have concerns about the, any financial aspects that could be in there. I thought we would have looked at those. Because I don't, and maybe I'm the only one, you can correct me if I am, but I thought when this came up 2 years ago that it was coming before us. I remember hearing that a couple of times. Maybe I'm got wax in my ears, I don't know, but I thought when this was decided to be amended or revamped or recreated, that it was supposed to come back for our consideration to look at. I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but, because it was about 2 years ago that it was the discussion had started on having this revamped. I don't know if anybody else has a different memory, and I could be wrong, and if I am, I apologize, but.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. To the CAO, and maybe I should have asked this during the finance report. Back in October, there was an issue in court between Town of Kentville and Mike's Clothing. And the judgment was Mike's Clothing was to pay $750. Has that been paid?
Yes, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. CEO, with regards to the King's permitting and inspection review, are they doing that separately from what the province is doing currently with regards to building inspectors and that, or am I mixing my metaphors here?
I would suspect they're going to merge together.
Okay.
I think the piece at this point was mainly to look at the town of Kentville as a purchaser of a service, finding out what our thoughts were around that, and also specifically as we saw the town growing, what might our needs be.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for the CAO with regards to his report? All right, moving on to your report on the Kentville Business Community funding contributions.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So what we've done is we've put together, and I want to thank Lindsay for putting this information together. We have essentially the levy that is collected from 2013-14 to 22-23, and included in there is then the transfer or the budget, if you will, that was allocated to KBC, and then the actual transfer. And agreements in the past had a core funding component, but then there were other components that were added. We'll call them special projects, but much of this were actually part of the launch of the facade program. So we wanted to make sure as much as possible we were breaking this into chunks so council could see what was collected, what the actual core funding was, and then essentially the actual transfer at the end of the day. I would point to, for council to look at 21-22 and 22-23, where you can see that the amount collected by the town was $113,653 and $113,899, and the actual amounts that would have been as part of the budget to KBC was $88,800 and $95,300. Now there was, as part of the agreement in 21-22, the ability for KBC to come in with presentations on any special projects and so on. I do know that there was an approval by approval for $10,000 for KBC in 21-22. However, I don't believe we were ever invoiced, nor was it ever sent. So 21-22, where the total shows $88,800, I do believe there was another $10,000 was approved by council but was never transferred. Just to give council though some representation, and this is some stuff that, some information that we were able to work in looking at some financials from KBC. So in 21-22, KBC actually expended $119,312. So the town made a contribution of $88,800, collected $113,653, and KBC actually expended $119,312. The biggest pieces that I would say in that variance are obviously, and KBC does and is actively applying for different grants, but I believe the facade program and some of the special projects are not fully captured in the $88,800 that's being used as a base budget. And so KBC continued to deliver on a number of commitments they had made, and thus took their actual expenditures past what the allocation was from the town. So again, recognizing the money from the town isn't the only money that would go to KBC, but I did want council to be aware that there is in excess of over $25,000 worth of funding that is made by KBC in 21-22 over and above the budget that the town did contribute.
Thank you, CAO. Deputy Mayor, as our representative on KBC, if you'd like the floor to give us any further information.
Thank you, Your Worship. So thank you for the report. It's really helpful and insightful. I have a few things. So just for clarity, the economic development levy that's collected, once that's collected, like, let's just use 2021, 2022, the 113,653. So that's collected, 88,800 was distributed to them. And then if there was another 25,000 special project transferred to them, which it wasn't, I understand that, that would come from, it all comes from that levy, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's that. Well, so secondly, I think for the 21-22 year, particularly where they expended 119,000, I think the remainder, 25,500 or what have you, should be advanced to them. Further, I think that the amount that we collect from the residential and commercial and industrial, I think it is, I think the full amount should be transferred to them on a per annum basis. I don't really know, I think, it was back in 16, 17 where we started doing the special projects and the 25,000, but, I think they're pretty high functioning. They're comfortable with their mandate. They know what the business community needs, so I'd like to see that change so that the full amount, that the levy that's collected gets transferred over to them. Further, and I'll end on this, and we're just discussing right now, but I'd like to see a 3-year agreement that takes us right through to 2024, 2025, that stays in place, that commences 2022 to 23 and then goes right through to 2025 with an escalation clause of 5% on a per annum basis to allow for increases in inflation, et cetera. Those are just some of my random comments. I can make a motions, Mayor.
So how about if we go with a single motion?
Okay.
Directing the CAO, because I see that he's scribbling madly here, to direct the CAO to provide direction to council at the January 30th, 2023 council meeting for a funding agreement with KBC to include any outstanding funding payments, and then all the other criteria that you've established, so that we would have a complete report that we could review and then make a decision and go forward with an agreement if that is agreeable to you.
That's fine with me.
And you would move that?
I will move that, yes,
All
thank
right,
you.
and if we could have a seconder? Councillor York, thank you. So it has been moved and seconded that CAC direct the CAO to provide direction to council at the January 30th, 2023 council meeting for a funding agreement with KBC to include any outstanding funding payments. And CAO, I did neglect to ask you if this was even doable by January 30th, but anyway, I guess it's kind of late now because we already got the motion on the floor. And Councillor York, your turn to speak.
Thank you. So I would like to reiterate what what Deputy Mayor Savage has said as well, that if we have a levy in place and we've all agreed to the levy and it's been voted on, then that levy should be allocated in its entirety. I also have questions about where the difference of that levy collected and the money going out, where did that go? Into our general coffers? Is it just kind of absorbed into our operating costs?
So it effectively at that point is a positive revenue source.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. I guess I'm old school, and I kind of like, I think it's nice to have that money kind of sitting there. If they need it, they can ask for it, and it doesn't mean we're not going to give it to them. I always like to have a safety net, and I think even if it's only, 20,000 or 25,000, whatever it is, it's kind of nice to have that sitting there. Things happen and things change. We've got an awesome group there. I can't say enough good about them, but we've seen different groups come in over the last 10 years. There's been different takes on it and different people in there, and the dynamics change sometimes. So personally myself, I always like to have a little safety net there, and if they need it, there's no reason why they can't come and ask for it. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's no, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Looking back over my 2 terms here that I'm serving. I believe that we kept that 25,000 back because at that time, KBC wasn't really operating at a high level. And I think this group is doing so, but there's never any guarantee that that's going to continue. What I would like to know is, do we see the financials from KBC each year? And if we're going to give them the full amount, then I would like to see the financials, as you do with any committee. And we've never seen any financials that I can think of in the recent memory. So I have no problem giving this group their full levy, but I would want to see their financials as well.
So Genevieve presented to council, and Paul Dixon, both of them came in and presented, and as well, when we attended their AGM, we also heard from their auditor on their statements. So, you know, it's, I'll say that their financials are very much on the up and up, and reflect the work that they have been doing.
I haven't missed any council meetings, so I don't remember them coming in and going through the financials with us. And so I know it would be done at their AGM, as it is with any committee, I know that. But this is money coming from our business community that, to the town of Kentville as a tax. I think that this council should see those financials. They come in and present them, give us a hard copy of the financials. They used to do that. We used to see their financials. That stopped. And so I would like to see the actual financials before I would approve a full amount. And like I said, I have no problem giving a full amount if we're seeing financials.
Certainly, CAO made a note of that. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. And I'm also happy to, on a monthly basis, the treasurer is always in attendance at the meeting, and when I do my recaps, I can include in that the interims to date, showing what their revenues and expenditures are. That's not an issue either, if it pleases council. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor York.
Through the chair, if I may.
Certainly.
We had a presentation from Genevieve and Paul, I believe over Zoom, where they gave us a detailed presentation about their finances and budget, and then they went through some of their requests as well. So we have had those presentations. I can't remember if it was it must have been the 2021 budget cycle, but they have made their presentations to us directly as a council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. Just one clarification or question, I guess, and I know the answer, but I just want to make sure I'm correct, if I do know the answer. The 25,000 for special projects would be above and beyond whether we give them the full amount or not, correct? That's a separate. It isn't separate? So if they get whatever it is, the full amount, then they can't come back and ask for the 25, or they still can? I thought that was a totally separate.
No, originally what happened was that there was, if you go back to 2016-17, there was the 50K.
Right.
So they got 25K out of the economic development levy, and then we held back a 25K and gave that to them above and beyond. So you'll see the 163,000
Right.
was greater than the 108 that was collected.
Okay.
So that's when we did that. And then what happened when after the 2016 election and we reviewed everything, we held 25K back, saying you have to show us why. And that 25K at that time was still for facade.
Okay.
It didn't change to special project until 18-19 timeframe, and then they had to come in and you notice the one that's 19,333. Well, that's because that was what it cost for that specific project that
Okay.
they did. And so we didn't just hand them 25K, they actually had to show us the financials for the project. And then we gave them the 25 for special projects. And then last year, they came in and wanted the 10K for the kiosks.
Right.
And we approved that 10K, but never, it never changed hands.
Okay. I guess I'm going back to what, I think they bought staging or something once, didn't they?
That's
Years ago,
That's,
before.
that's
yeah.
correct. They had made a bid for that, and I think that was the 19,333.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any further questions on this matter? All right, so the question is that CAC direct the CAO to provide direction to council at the January 30th, 2023 council meeting for a funding agreement with KBC to include any outstanding funding payments. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. CAO, there is an extra CAC meeting planned for the 16th of January. Do we have any topics for this meeting at this time? And council, if there is a matter for the meeting, please send details to the CAO prior to the close of business on Wednesday, the 11th of January. So CAO?
So at this time, Mayor Snow, I do not have any reason to hold that date, but should council bring one forward, we can look at it.
All right. So council, if you have anything that is of burning interest, please let the CAO know by close of business on Wednesday so that he can put together some information and get it back out to council. And CAO, can you please advise council of the status of the meeting and subsequently notify the public as per our standard protocols? Staff reports have been presented and are now part of the record of this meeting. Staff, thank you very much, and Happy New Year. We appreciate what you do. All right, our only piece of correspondence this evening is with regards to the boundary review, and CAO, you already let the cat out of the bag, so no changes to the size of our council. Deputy Mayor, I see you had your light on, I'm sorry.
It's okay, I just have a question. If we hold the January 16th meeting, it is not live streamed, correct?
That's correct. However, it is recorded,
It's recorded,
and it
okay.
will be uploaded after the meeting.
And
But the public can attend.
they can attend.
Yes.
And there have, like, what sort of items can we, like, it can't just be anything. What's your favorite recipe over
Originally, the thought behind this was that there have been a number of requests, particularly from the province, for council to complete documentation. So whether it's surveys or whether it's providing comment back on different documents. And so originally, the thought was to hold those dates for those types of items.
Okay.
In addition, the potential to use these during budget. So if we did a budget presentation and there was some follow-up, we potentially could use them as an interim information session before then going to council. So those would be the kind of two examples of what might be used.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Maxwell.
When will we know whether or not we're going to have the meeting? How quick will that come out?
It will be Thursday if
You'll send an email out?
the CAO will, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And those meetings, that interim meeting is always at 4 p.m. on that third Monday. All right, CAO, moving right along to new business, and you've provided us with a report on the Heritage Committee. If you could brief us.
Sure. So I know that this took a little bit of time for us to move forward on. So in November, 2 members of council were appointed to the Heritage Committee. We have had a number of folks come forward who expressed interest in participating in this. So I just wanted to let council know that we will be bringing forward a list of community members for council's consideration at the January 30th meeting. which would then allow us to begin moving forward and building the bricks and mortar of the Heritage Committee.
Oh, nice play, nice play. All right, so we'll expect to see that on our January 30th and our approval of members of committee. And as you say, we have two members of council, Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Zabian have already put their names forward. So we look forward to that. So moving right along, we have a request for decision from Councillor Gerard with regards to a planning committee. Councillor Gerard, the floor is yours.
Very briefly, Your Worship, I brought this up a couple of years ago, and I feel, especially with the amount of land and the expectation of the Donald Hiltz collector, now's the time to start gauging for the future what the town and what new development's going to look like in the town. Another conversation I had, and I think I had it with Dan, I also had it with Jennifer, actually. We could basically create our MPS and LUB documents to be living documents, so every 5 years, we don't have to have collective committees and a big song and dance and large procedures to go through. It can just be, here's the new document based on our feedback from, the committee as well as council. And I really think it's time that the public gets engaged in stuff having to do with planning. And, there's tons of land that needs to be developed in this town. How we're gonna do it and what vision we do it with is very important, and I think it's time we had a committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. So CAO, we had a similar RFD back in April of 2022, and I guess the question is, how do we move forward on standing up this committee, particularly as we're seeing major environmental and community events that affect how we use our governing documents, both our municipal planning strategy, MPS, and our LUB land use bylaw to make our decisions. And as a council, we're often given a report and said, basically told to make a decision. We have the staff report, and staff reports are wonderful, but we're doing the first check and the second double check on this sort of stuff. So I think, as Councillor Gerard mentioned, getting our citizens involved and making sure that we're doing the right development at the right time in this town. So I'll hand it to you, put you on the hot spot.
I agree, and in fact, it has been something that I've had the opportunity to participate in other jurisdictions, used all for different purposes. I would say that right now, there's even the potential to consider a secondary plan, and the councillor, and I know many folks around this table have talked about the development opportunities here in the town. So do we need to consider looking at some secondary planning that would go beyond kind of what we know today? So if we're talking about, potentially, let's call it hundreds of acres of development over time. It's something that there's been discussions between our public works folks and our planning group. Quite frankly, that kind of secondary plan, we would probably put a placeholder in this budget. Shouldn't say probably, it's our thought that we would put a placeholder within this budget process coming up to look at having that broader consultation around that piece. With regards to standing up a planning committee, I believe it's a good idea, and I would say that if I were making a recommendation to council, that maybe it's something we do directly after the budget process.
All right, so CAO, by consensus, can we get you or get the process started on going out to citizens and checking the level of interest, much like we did with the Heritage Committee, and see who's out there and who's interested?
Certainly can do that. Jennifer can kind of follow the exact same plan that we've been using for our other items to get the word out and get collection back of some names.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Well, thank you. you know, I think probably a planning committee is a good idea, but we don't even have a planning director. So are we going to allow people who have no background to come in and start telling us how to do the planning in this town? I think, I'm feeling like maybe we're a bit premature here, and that we should first of all hire a planning director, somebody who goes to provincial planning meetings, who meets with other planning directors around the province, and is up to date on all the documents and so on. So, you know, I just don't see, I don't see what the motivation is here without a planning director. Are we gonna go with no planning director in the town of Kentville? And if so, then who's the authority that's going to keep us up to speed on everything planning? That's my concern.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. I have to echo what Councillor Maxwell just said. You know, it might be, you know, I look at a lot of our departments, and I mean, I'm one who thinks that there should be a Parks and Rec committee too, but I mean, we don't have a planning director right now, and I think this is kind of premature. Certainly none of us around here have the experience to sit there, to guide it, or to, you know, to give the information on it. I think it's a great idea, but it's definitely the wrong timing. I think find a planning director first, and further to that, I'd like to know at some point what the plan is for that. I think that's a big void right now we have, and we claim that Kentville's so busy with development, but we don't have a planning director, so another problem there. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. So there's a couple of things with this, and I'm sort of scrolling down to the one, Mayor Snow, that you brought forward in April of 2022. Where you talk about the committee shall include, and one of the things there is a CMHC representative, provincial housing representative. I think those were the two main ones that I had questions around, like how, are there other municipalities that have those representatives on a planning committee? And just to maybe ask in a different way, and this, I'll direct it to the CAO if I can, in terms of the planning piece, in terms of what that sort of looks like on a go-forward basis. I think you had talked a little bit about public works and planning sort of working more cohesively together, and maybe some consultative pieces coming out of that. Is that something you could speak to, and then the representative pieces?
Thank you. So with regards to planning committees that you see, they're all structured a little bit different in different locations, largely because what they typically will provide in some cases is either a mechanism for things that might not be considered in a traditional sense make their way through. I know this might sound a little bit odd, but some places planning committees are actually heavily involved in things like driveway access, because if properties are only allowed to have one access point, and you have folks who then want a second one and things like that. And so they move a little bit away from the deeper dive into your MPS and LUB, and then talk about giving councils consideration for things that maybe were not necessarily out there. Now, that's certainly just a general example, but sometimes they are used for some things that are kind of just that basic, to give a secondary voice that goes along with a report, perhaps from your development officer or whoever as you move through. But the other part, of course, is that our MPS and our LUB over time are going to go through more revisions as different types of development make their way forward. What are the things we're going to see that we're not even picturing today, and what does that look like, and how's that going to need to be considered? So Kentville right now doesn't do development agreements, but is there a place for that in the world as we move forward? Lastly, with regards to your comment, my intention is there's going to be a number of requests with regards to the FTE, or the full-time equivalent piece, within the budget section. And so as we bring the budget forward, we're going to be talking, and we had a presentation from the police making that position they're looking for, But similarly, as the town is growing, we've got technical and, some different boots on the ground labor requirements that I think would probably be very important to be looking at and filling sooner than later. And so my intent as part of the budget process would be to lay these things out, let council take a look at it. Obviously, there's financial consideration along with operational. And so these will be pieces that we'll bring forward as part of the budget, deliberation.
Okay, thank you. And then Mayor Snow, just the question around the provincial housing rep and the CMHC rep.
I was reaching for the sky.
Oh, okay, that's it, okay.
I really wanted to.
Big audacious.
And actually, believe it or not, I just added a name to that because if you recall last month when Gary made the presentation from the real estate perspective.
Yes.
Imagine having that information every time that you're making planning decisions. So, it's that old saying, good information leads to good decisions, and I think that the more information that you have, and so I was reaching for the stars, but that's why I put them as ex officio, so that they could be on the committee, but they didn't have to be there to have quorum.
Okay, thank you.
So CAO, you've got an action on that, and you're good with that? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. So, am I hearing you correct that during the budget, we will have a planning director come out of the budget? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I'm talking about, there's a number of full-time equivalent positions that need to be considered.
Yes.
And structurally, there would be some changes that would come along with that.
So, am I hearing you correctly when I'm thinking that we're going to go ahead in the town of Kemptville with no planning director?
So I think there's two pieces that, and I don't want the past to be contaminating the future here. Understanding the way in which we are using our planning group is not exactly the way that it's used in a lot of other places. So we're kind of talking about the planning and director as there's functions there that are needed, and they don't all have to land in the same job. And so I recognize there's a comfort level, and that's what folks have had. But I also believe that there's a lot of pressures where there's crossover between multiple parts of this organization that you may not need a planning director. You need a director, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a planning director. And you do have a lot of technical needs that were not being done in this town, and I believe that we need to make sure we have those resources.
Is there a specific qualification for someone who would become a planning director? Like, do they go to a college or a university to do planning? And so they learn how to lay out streets, and they learn how, what's the most up-to-date ways to plan green space and things like that? Or can anybody just, jump into a role of a planning director? Like, are there qualifications that a person would have, a professional?
I'm not going to really get into great depth as to what a planning director would need, because again, I suspect each municipal unit would have a different set of qualifications for what they would want. Typically, folks would go through a university urban planning process if you were going to be the lead planner.
Right.
That's not always the case, though, in that there are a number of technical sub-schools now that offer pieces of that training as well. And again, part of what, and again, it'll be, I think, easier to see as we have this discussion as part of the budget process, but we have a great deal of needs that are in a technical capacity, both between public works and between planning, that we don't have right now, and we need it. And so I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for council to see that within a budget process, because obviously there's opportunities here where you might say the financial cost of this is too much, or it might even be that, you can get 2 or 3 positions at one level versus one position at another level. So there's those things that council, I think, should have a discussion around before we proceed.
Okay. I'm just very uncomfortable having a planning committee made up of some counselors and members of the community directing the planning in the town of Kentville without anybody having any kind of actual qualifications to do so. And I understand that, I understand what you're saying, there are many different, like our engineering department and our public works, and when they all need to work together. But man, I would want somebody with some kind of background leading the show, and I feel very uncomfortable right now.
Councillor, the MGA is very clear that a planning advisory committee only advises council, and at the end of the day, only council makes those decisions. But in every recommendation that would come from a PAC, there would also be a staff report. So those 6 people would not be making the decision. They would be reviewing documentation and the idea, the proposal, and that with a staff report would come to council, and we are the only ones who can make those decisions.
I understand, Mayor Snow, but the thing is, I'm not qualified to make those kind of decisions.
You're
And-
making them now.
Well, I mean, I'm relying on staff to give me the most up-to-date information. Am I supposed to rely on a couple of counselors and some members of the community to now do that research and then give me the recommendations? I'm just feeling very uncomfortable with this road.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. Yeah, I have concern too, because, you know, for my 2 years and even before watching them, watched these meetings religiously or came to them. I mean, I like to turn to the director, whoever it may be, whether it was Director Gentleman or whoever in the past, and ask them for their advice. I mean, they've taken the time and, you know, educated themselves to be able to sit in that chair. So I understand the value that some of you may see in a committee, and I mean, that could definitely be discussed at some point, but I'm a little uneasy now that we're gonna go into budget time and we're like 3-4 months away before that's final, and we're gonna be 3 or 4 months without a director. This is uneasy to me, and whether it's, some of you are gonna say, well, you're into operational, but we're really not. This is, you know, that's a hole. And I don't know how the rest of you feel. I look at it, and it is a grave concern, because there is no one there to sit over and ask, and it, you know, whether we're going the right route or the right steps. I like that little bit of feedback. I'm a businessman. I sell clothes and I have rental properties. I'm not a planning director. So when I have a question, I like to shoot down there, whether it's Director of Finance or Public Works or whoever. That's who I need a little bit of guidance from. No, I'm not gonna expect them to make the decision for me, but that's why they're there. Otherwise, no municipal unit would have any directors, and we would just be free for all. So there is some concern there, and I think that, I hope I'm not the only one, but that does concern me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have now finished the business, but we do have in-camera work. And so we have contractual and personnel matters which must be conducted in a closed session. We require a motion to go into the closed session to discuss the agenda items, and we will not be returned to Facebook Live for the adjournment of this meeting. So if I could have a motion to move into the closed session. Thank you, Councillor Gerard. And the seconder, Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council move into the closed session. The question is on the adoption of the motion to move into the closed session. All those in favor? Those opposed, the motion is carried, and the time is 7:31.